Hi everyone and welcome to Tales of Dread. For centuries, people have been obsessed with the idea that intelligent beings live on the surface of Mars, which doesn't seem to have any life. At the end of the 1980s, there is evidence that Russia may have been the country that came closest to proving the existence of such beings. In this video we look at the strange end of Phobos 2. The technicians in the control room were happy as they kept an eye on the signal that the probe was sending back through the depths of space. The 6-month wait for the craft to get to its destination had been stressful, especially since the first satellite that had been launched before it had mysteriously broken down. But this time, the trip was over with only a few problems for the 3 computers that were in charge of the probe. One had a software problem, but that didn't stop it from scanning the surface of Phobos before sending images back to Earth. So far, the mission was one of the most successful ones the Soviet Space Agency had ever done. There was no reason to think that the controllers wouldn't be able to move on to the next step, which was to put 2 landers on the surface of the empty moon. It was now in orbit while it was high up above the control room. Scientists and other technicians looked at an image on a screen below the senior technician with pride. This was the 36th picture from the probe that had been sent back so far. There was so much information that it would take months to sort through it all. There was a loud noise from the other side of the room that caught everyone by surprise. The controller heard someone yell that the sensors on the satellite had picked up something strange. A large, unknown object had appeared in a higher orbit and was now slowly falling toward the probe. Scientists knew they didn't have enough time to try to program the satellite to move away to avoid a collision. The person in charge of the device's camera is told to take a picture by shouting the control to him. Still, it would take a few minutes for this command to reach the small craft through space. But hopefully this was enough time to help figure out what was going on. In case something bad happened in the next few minutes, everyone in the control room kept their eyes on the data that the probe sensors were sending until another technician yelled that all contact had been lost. The hours that were spent trying to get in touch with the satellite again went by quickly. In 2 days, neither the device nor it were able to send or receive any signals. It was clear that it must have been hit by something and smashed up. As he got ready to give an update to the Oversight Committee, which had asked him to do so, he thought about this. The person in charge of the probe looked down at the last picture it had taken. The picture showed a huge, elliptical shadow falling onto the surface of Phobos from a satellite in orbit above it. He would later say that he didn't know what could have caused such a strange thing to happen, and if it wasn't a strange thing, he didn't know what it was. He had explained his calculations about how big the unknown object would have to be to make such a big shadow. He also said that the shape of the object did look like what Americans call a flying saucer. Then he walked out of the briefing room, leaving the committee members behind him speechless. The first time the moons of Mars were seen was in August 1877, when people at the United States Naval Observatory noticed that there were 2 objects in orbit around the red planet. In time, they would call the pair Phobos and Deimos, after the twin sons of Ares, the Greek god of war. Phobos, on the other hand, was the god of fear and panic. And this name turned out to be a chillingly good choice later on. Decades of close observation showed that Phobos was the closest celestial body to a parent planet in the solar system, closer than any other satellite that had been found at the time. Due to how close they were, the moon of Mars had a very fast orbit. It only took it 8 hours to go all the way around its host planet. It was also said that Phobos was one of the satellites that reflected the least amount of light. When images of Mars's 2 moons, Phobos and Deimos, were sent back to Earth by the American Mariner 7 probe in 1969, it became clear why they were so dark. Phobos and Deimos were both old piles of broken and crumpled rock that had been pressed together in orbit around Mars. The most popular theory about how the pair came to be was that Mars had a terrible crash with another object, possibly a protoplanet, a long time ago. This apocalyptic disaster sent millions of tons of rock and dust into the atmosphere, where some of them crashed together to form the two moons. NASA doesn't care much about where Phobos and Deimos came from or what they are made of. Russia was the first country to say it would send a mission to study them. In 1988, during the summer, the Soviets said that they had sent out 2 probes to take pictures and get samples from the surface of Phobos. However, after a third of the 6-month trip, they lost contact with the probes. By using either of the 2 probes. In August of 1988, it was found that the missing spacecraft's thrusters had been turned off by mistake because of a hidden software bug. This caused the solar panels to lose sight of the sun, which led to a catastrophic loss of power. The second probe, on the other hand, got to Phobos on January 29, 1989, and started taking pictures of the strange moon below right away. Since February, it sent a steady stream of information to its controllers on Earth before its final descent to the surface to drop off 2 landers. But, for some reason, on the afternoon of March 28, a large mass was found to be moving toward the probe, and there wasn't enough time to program the probe's thrusters to avoid a collision. Instead, it was decided to quickly try to take a picture of the object coming closer. After this, there was no more contact with the probe. Technicians spent several days trying to regain control of the satellite before deciding that it must have been destroyed because it wasn't receiving or sending any signals. The most disturbing thing about the situation, though, was when they got the last picture that the Phobos 2 probe took right before it mysteriously broke up. The black and white picture it sent back showed a huge elliptical shadow falling onto the moon's surface below where the satellite was in orbit. When asked if this picture could have been caused by a software bug or a problem with one of the instruments, mission technicians said this was impossible. The picture was taken with 2 different cameras, and one of them had an infrared filter. The timing of the image also matched up with the last data from the sensors that had been sent right before the crash. Even scarier is that scientists have tried to figure out how big the oval object that made the shadow could have been. Using the camera on the probe and its known points of reference, they told the authorities that this unknown mass must have been at least 20 kilometers across. As the people in charge of making the mission tried to figure out what to do with this information, there was also some unexpected news. An update to one of the images sent by the probe seemed to show a structure sticking up from the rocky surface near the huge Stickney crater. Calculations showed that this huge building must have been somewhere between 90 and 85 meters tall and wide. It looked like it was shooting straight up from the ground and pointing menacingly at the probe in orbit. Its smooth, shiny surface was a sharp contrast to the broken, man-made landscape it had come from. This left the Russian government with a lot of troubling questions that they needed to answer. Who or what took out their probe? And did this happen by accident? Or a quite deliberate and aggressive act? And was their craft's destruction a direct result of the mysterious structure it seemed to have found and recorded, even though they worked hard to keep the real story of how the probe went missing from getting out to the media? It wasn't long before people started telling stories about what had happened. Several articles in both the Russian and international press, as well as leaked photos of both the descending shadow and the monolith, led to a lot of speculation. The most common theory was that the Phobos 2 probe had been destroyed by a huge alien mothership coming down from above to the surface of Phobos. Because this supposed ship was so big, some people thought that the supposed collision may have been an accident, as the huge size of the ship would have made it hard to avoid. Some authors, on the other hand, said that the alien ship destroyed the probe on purpose because it had found the monolith, which was part of a larger alien settlement on or under the surface of the Martian moon. Others say that the monolith in the picture might have been an ancient tool or weapon, and that it was the structure itself that destroyed the passing satellite by shooting it out of the sky. Astronomers have talked a lot about the possibility that Phobos is hollow, with huge spaces between the rocks and boulders that make up its larger structure and are only held together by a thin crust on the surface. People have made similar claims about our own moon. They say that civilizations may have lived under the surface of these celestial bodies, where they were mostly hidden from the probes we sent there. Rarely has any supposed proof of their existence ever been caught on film. Is it possible that the probe was destroyed because it unexpectedly found evidence of an alien civilization when it landed in orbit over Phobos? Given the tensions caused by the Cold War, which had been going on for decades, it wasn't surprising that the US government was also blamed, just like the Russians, if they had been doing secret space fights and had already sent their own craft with destructive capabilities to Mars. The two images that were taken by the probe are hard to explain away in a convincing way. From the data that came with them, it's clear that they weren't caused by a technical glitch and that they were really taken by the probe's cameras. However, those who want to disprove the idea that there's a secret alien base hidden on Phobos point to the failures of the Soviet space program as evidence against the idea. To add to this, two more Mars probes with the same design that were sent out by the Russian Space Agency in 1996 and 2011 failed to reach the Red Planet. In 1989, when the probe got there, one of the three computers on board had completely broken down, and the other two were also acting up. It is entirely possible that the device was lost because of a problem inside it and that there was never a real collision. Most people think that the monolith isn't much more than a naturally occurring feature, like other supposed structures that can be seen on the surface of Mars. The famous Martian face and other supposed structures, like pyramids and space stations, that have been seen on Mars have since been shown to be nothing but interesting rock formations that have been worn away by weathering and erosion. Scientists say that, like these other examples, the Phobos monolith is just a tall rock that is sticking up out of the ground. It is likely that it was put there when the moon was first made, when a big thing happened. Shadows and the angle at which the photo was taken at the time it was taken make an object that might otherwise be natural look mysterious. However, people still claim to have seen alien structures on the surface of our own moon and on Mars as a result of more exploration. As time goes on, it gets harder for scientists to explain away these images. High-definition imaging shows color changes that can't be explained. This seems to show more than ever that our neighboring planets have strange features on their surfaces that can't be natural. Will it still be possible to say that these pictures are just random rock formations or some kind of optical trick? Or are we headed for a time and event where proof of an alien civilization that can't be denied will be published online in front of our eyes? Bedtime story will only be known by time.